Welcome to another one of Mr. Thorpe's high-tech revision sessions. This one is on B602, Good and Evil. This is for the exam on Friday. So here we go. One of the biggest problems, if you believe in God, is the existence of evil. And you have to be able to give a response to that question. One, understand what it is. Firstly, the idea that evil exists. And if evil exists and God exists, why doesn't God do something about it? Is he not meant to be all-powerful? Is he not meant to be all-loving? Is he not meant to be all-knowing? And if he is those things, why doesn't he stop evil? Either he can't, he doesn't, or he doesn't exist. And this is known as classically the problem of evil. Well, if you're a believer in God, you have to give a response. So here are a range of responses that a religious person may well give to the existence of evil. Firstly, you've got this one here. It fits in with God's plan in the end. We are finite. We will only exist for a period of time. God is infinite. Perhaps God in some way uses evil to work out good purposes in the end. Unfortunately, we can't see that because we only exist on this earth for a short period of time. And God, if he is eternal, can see the beginning from the end. So perhaps that is a response. Also, there's this idea that it's actually a mystery. The problem of evil, we will never ultimately know it. That only God ultimately will know it. And we need to learn to live with the questions and continue to have faith in spite of it. And the idea that it's a mystery may seem like a cop-out, but actually we don't know all the answers and maybe we never will. Maybe that's the element of faith, not to know all the answers. Otherwise, why would it be faith? The third point, the devil is the cause of evil. The devil being this figure that fell from heaven, that's God's enemy, that leads people to do things that are bad. Therefore, he is the cause and he is the reason evil exists, and he's influencing people to do bad things. The other thing is it develops character, that when people struggle or ask questions or go through difficult times, you could argue that it makes them better people if they choose to respond appropriately to the test or to what's happening to them, I suppose. You could argue it develops them into better people, more loving, more compassionate, more caring people. The next thing is the idea of it being a punishment or judgment from God, that evil is simply a response to human wrongdoing, that he punishes humans and he judges them on earth in real time for the things that they're doing wrong, morally perhaps, and that's why evil exists. You also have the idea of the free will argument, the idea that human beings have free will, and it's actually human beings' choice that causes the problems. They choose to pull triggers on guns, they choose to plunge knives into people or hurt other people. It's not God's fault. The idea if you took free will away or stopped people doing bad things, then we would cease to be human, and potentially God would cease to be God, because he stepped in and stopped us doing what as human beings we have the capacity to do. Therefore, he oversteps the mark, so to speak. And then finally, you have, it's a test of faith. There are lots of people in the Bible, Job, Jesus, who had their faith tested. You're having your knowledge tested at the moment. You need to test things, don't you, to see if they're real or genuine. So to have your faith tested through the existence of something that challenges it is a way of doing that. Finally, just an analogy for you. If you imagine a fantastic piece of art that's been drawn and it's worth millions of pounds, and someone then comes along and draws all over that piece of art, and if you like, graffitis on it and kind of defaces it. Now, in essence, that piece of art is still a good piece of art. It's still a quality piece of art underneath. The fact that it's been defaced does not mean that the goodness of the artist or the goodness of the piece of art in some way is diminished. It just means that it's harder to see. So if you think about the problem of evil a little bit like that, sometimes that evil can try and take away what's good, but it can't ultimately completely cover it up. The second thing is obviously to do with goodness, as it's good and evil, is God. God is seen to be the source of all goodness and moralness, if that is a word. And how do you understand what God is like? Well, obviously through the Bible, as it's a guidebook, and it tells people what God is like. Obviously, good equals moral, and moral is good. All-powerful, all-loving, all-knowing. God is meant to be those things and many other things as well. And also that God is meant to be the source of all goodness. And you can find out about God by reading the Bible as well as it's a guidebook. Also up here, the existence of evil, or the problem of evil, is an issue for the existence of God as well. So God is meant to be the source of all goodness, the source of all moralness, if that is a word, and you find out about him through the Bible. What about evil? Well, here we go. Evil. Evil is a number of different things. So, how do we explain evil? Well, we've got a number of different ideas here. We've got the idea of the devil. That some people view the devil as symbolic, some view him as a literal being, and he was once meant to be a fallen angel. Symbolic means he's a symbolic representation. The Statue of Liberty is a symbol of, obviously, America and freedom. The devil may be just simply a symbol of all that's good. If you take the devil literally, you genuinely think that he is a being existing and making people or leading people to do the wrong thing. Or he may be a symbolic symbol of our own ability or inability to manage our own temptation or our own desires. Possibly, whatever that works out, you think. Right, moral evil. Yeah, moral evil is simply things that humans do, such as murder. Natural evil are things like volcanoes, earthquakes and such like. Immoral acts. Obviously, a definition of evil is simply immoral acts, to do immoral acts. At the bottom here, you have this idea of it disproves the existence of God. So for some people, evil exists and it disproves that God exists, because a good God and a powerful God surely wouldn't let evil continue in his world. How do you explain evil if not in a religious kind of way? Well, you have a number of different ways here. Upbringing, greed, anger, sex, jealousy. They're all ways that people commit, or the ways through that people commit evil acts. Some people think it's a psychological phenomena, i.e. that people in their brain have been affected to do bad things. They've lost empathy, so they commit evil. Other people think that simply as a result of a bad upbringing and making bad choices, people do evil. The absence of good is also a classic idea about what evil is or is not. Some people think evil doesn't even exist. It simply is the absence of good. So evil is a number of different things, and that might be helpful to you if you get a question about evil. Now, the next one is about suffering. And what is suffering? Now, suffering and evil are closely linked, but they're slightly different. So, what is suffering? Well, suffering can happen because of a number of reasons. It can happen because of a result of personal choices or personal decisions. I may have made some bad decisions that lead to my own suffering. If I drink too much or I decide to do bad things, and the result of those things may lead me to suffer. If I smoke, then I may suffer as a result of that, so on and so forth. Judgment. My suffering may be a result of God judging me for doing bad things. Suffering may simply just be a part of life, and you have to accept it. As finite beings that are only living a certain period of time, then unfortunately we will all die one day. So suffering is just a part of life. What's this one here? Produces positive outcomes. Now, suffering can and has done in many people produced a depth of character, a genuineness of a person who has suffered. You know, they're full of compassion, they're full of love, they're full of mercy because of what they've been through. They've suffered and they've changed as a result of that. Not necessarily linked to choice. So there is an element of suffering, ladies and gentlemen, that has nothing to do with what you do or I do. Unfortunately, some people get ill. It's not because of personal choice. It simply seems to be because that's the way the world works, or the way human beings work anyway. So it's not necessarily always linked to personal choice. You can have emotional suffering and also physical suffering. So physical suffering is where you feel it in your body. Emotional might be where you feel it in your emotions, your mind, in some way, shape or form. And they can happen for a variety of reasons as well. Obviously, most importantly, Jesus suffered. In the Christian faith, Jesus was God and he lived on earth. He died a horrible death. and suffering is part of Jesus' life. Every Easter they remember the suffering of Christ. So if you are a Christian, suffering should not surprise you. Suffering is what Jesus did, and I suppose Christians use Jesus as an example of how to manage, cope with suffering or deal with it. The final one, moral guidance. Obviously moral means good, guidance means being helped to make a decision. And obviously to do with good and evil is about making the right decisions. Now, obviously here we're talking about Christians. So what are we saying? Moral guidance. In the Bible, there are lots of different types of moral guidance. I'll come on to some suggestions in a minute. If you go to church, you get taught moral guidance from the church or the vicar and the church teaching, such as a Catholic church or the Protestant church. Here you have famous Christians, Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, Wilberforce, many other Christians as well, obviously lived good moral lives, and they are examples that people can use to follow. You may live a morally good life because you want to please God, who is the source of all goodness. So obviously you believe the Bible has come from God, who is the ultimate source of goodness, so you're going to follow it because it's naturally the right thing to do. You may simply live a moral life because you want to get to heaven. You want to be rewarded by God. We all want to be rewarded for something. Prayer is a way you can receive moral guidance. You can pray to God to help you, to guide you, to help you make your choices and decisions, and to give you some guidance in that. To be an example. Why do you want moral guidance? Because you want to reflect something of God to other people. And be a witness of the fact that you're doing the right thing, and that is because of this idea of God. Finally, you've got things like the Ten Commandments, which are sources of moral teachings, which tells you what to do and what not to do. And obviously, if you think about those logically, do not kill, do not steal, do not lie, obviously the consequences of those are to live a good life or to promote life and to promote telling the truth, which is obviously better than lying and killing. And Jesus' teachings, love your neighbour as you love yourself. The teachings about anger, teachings about forgiveness, turning the other cheek. There are lots and lots of teachings of Jesus to help people live moral lives. So morality, living a good life and moral guidance is how you can avoid evil and how Christians can avoid evil too. Right, that's it. I hope you do well in the exam. See you soon.